All right, so Kristen Welker on Meet the Press, in keeping with this theme, Marco Rubio in an administration of freaks, weirdos, and criminals will definitely, when the history is written, be up there as one of the worst of this crew of crackpots. She's so bad, she makes him look pretty reasonable in this interview. You know, she's demanding we sanction Russia. I'm sure she has kids. I'm sure she has kids. Like if I ever am able to pull a Jose on her, I'm gonna. Would you send your kids to go fight in Ukraine? Like these people are so insistent that we have to antagonize Russia because they don't believe they'll ever have skin in the game. They're
Right.
rich, they're going to stay that way, and their kids are never fighting in a war. And the one is what leads into the other. Their kids are never going to have to. They'll always find ways to protect the people that they care about. They're never going to face the consequences. Um, Rubio's answer is actually completely reasonable. She's the unhinged one in this interview.
But why not impose more sanctions on them and force them to agree to a ceasefire instead of accepting that Putin won't agree to one?
Well, first,
I'm sorry. That is such a stupid fucking question from any perspective. From any perspective. This is a journalist, so-called journalist, who's getting paid millions of dollars. Hosting Meet the Press. I don't know the exact number. I'm sure it's good, not mad out money, but she's making millions of dollars to do this gig. Even if you are, you favor Ukraine and you feel Russia's the worst country ever, you have to know that these sanctions have completely failed that we've already imposed. So why on earth are you even asking that question? Much less with this kind of insistence that is the right thing to do, as if that's obvious.
I think that's something that a lot of people go around saying that I don't necessarily think is true. I don't think new sanctions on Russia are going to force them to accept the ceasefire. They're already under very severe sanctions. I think that it should be. You could argue that could be a consequence of refusing to agree to a ceasefire or the end of hostilities. But there is no evidence that more sanctions, because sanctions take months and sometimes years to bite. And we may very well wind up in that place. I hope not, because that means that peace talks failed. But we have to give every opportunity for peace a chance in this particular case. And that's what we're trying to do here. And so those options remain to the president. The minute he takes those steps, all talk stop. The minute we take those steps, there is no one left in the world to go talk to the Russians and try to get them to the table to reach a peace agreement. So that moment may come. I hope not, because I hope we get a peace deal.
But so, Mr. Secretary, a lot of people have heard President Trump threaten sanctions for months, and they are wondering, are they empty threats? Why hasn't he punished Putin to date for this war since taking office?
Because he can't.
Well, again, every single sanction that was in place on the day he took over remained.
Who's winning the war? Boom. Look, you just did our job for you. I think NBC owes you $50,000 for that 15 seconds.
Yeah.
That's right about what she gets paid to spew absolute ridiculous nonsense. If you want to know why your lib relatives are as deranged as they are, this is why. This is why. Because this is where they get the beginning and the end of their understanding of the world from people like Kristen Welker saying these kinds of things as if they make sense. Of course, they don't make sense if you just spend, those of us who kind of went through the red pill thing in 2016, that was one of the worst parts of it for me personally. I felt so stupid. And if you're somebody who's used to thinking of yourself as a reasonably intelligent person, it's very embarrassing because once you actually look at what this is, it's obvious. Like, it's such obvious propaganda. All you have to do is some basic research or just think. Like, everybody knows Russia's been sanctioned up the wazoo for the entirety of this war, and their economy is doing better than it was before the war. I mean, that's pretty common knowledge. So how does what she's saying make any sense?
Well, just think in terms of simple, game theory, if you will. I mean, this is like saying in, December 1864 to Abraham Lincoln, all right, listen, why don't you just let them have Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, let the Confederacy, let those 3 states go. Why? We're winning. We're winning. Right? You can't turn the screws on the winner because
Right.
you're the loser. Right? When you lose, you are in a subservient position to the winner. It's as simple as that.
Right. Like, why would Russia? They just made a breakthrough on their front lines.
There's
Like, they're winning the war, and in terms of a war of attrition from the beginning, it was always obvious Ukraine can't possibly win a war of attrition with Russia,
Right.
a country whose potential manpower dwarfs their own. By definition, a war of attrition is going to favor Russia unless you have, some kind of, 23rd century technology hidden in the closet.
Impact of all those sanctions remain. When the Russians landed in Alaska, they were there to refuel. They had to offer to pay in cash to refuel their airplanes because they can't use our banking system. They face consequences every single day. But the bottom line is that has not altered the direction of this war. That doesn't mean those sanctions are inappropriate. It means it hasn't altered the outcome of it. And here's what we do think is important, and that is that we end this war. To end this war, you have to be able to engage with the Russians. As much as people may not like it, as distasteful as people may find it, the only way to end this war is to get the Russians to agree, as well as the Ukrainians, but the Russians to agree to a peace deal. And the minute you issue new sanctions, your ability to get them to the table, our ability to get them to the table, will be severely diminished. That moment may arrive, but when it comes, what you're basically signaling is there is no opportunity for peace at this point. So just let's put on more sanctions and allow more people to get bombed and more people to be killed. And that's what we're trying to stop.
Yeah, that was like a masterclass in why nobody trusts the media anymore. You made that lying scumbag look credible because what he's saying makes sense. Like, their basic premise is you should not make peace. They're starting from that premise. So what he's saying makes sense if you want peace. Sure, if you want peace, what's the point in imposing sanctions that would be largely symbolic at this point, given the level of sanctions we've already imposed on Russia to really no effect other than to weaken our own standing in the world and to accelerate the process of de-dollarization and the BRICS countries finding alternate payment systems undermining our geopolitical influence. Other than that, what have these sanctions accomplished? And these people, that is where, people like Kristen Welker, when Trump says they're an enemy of the people, they are. The party's not telling you is the people he favors are also enemies of the people. They're just not enemies of him. That's what he really means.
Right.
Please clap.